All right, so I have one article for you in this video, and I guess it could be considered a good news article. Basically, it's showing how MAGA, especially, but seemingly like Republicans in general, are so desperate to be right, to hate a group of people, that they completely and utterly ignore nuance and, other words people use. I've seen it in comments here and other places. I just made a comment on Nextdoor when someone brought up a case that the Fifth Circuit shot down with Biden. And it's like the Fifth Circuit are like desperate to out-conservative the Supreme Court. And when I pointed that out, she had no idea what I was talking about. Even though in the very headline, the title of the article mentions the Fifth Circuit. She was so focused on Biden losing a court case that she ignored all other details about the case. So it wouldn't surprise you that this happened. Co-author of Gender-Affirming Care Reviews says they've been misused to justify bans. Like I said, not a surprise because people are desperate to point and say, see, I'm right. Even when the science says the exact opposite of what they think it says. Because they just desperately want validation that they're right about something. Because they've never been right about anything in their entire freaking lives. I mean, I can't imagine why else you are that desperate to be right on an issue unless you've been on the wrong side in every issue ever. Anyway. A scientist who's co-authored several reviews of gender-affirming care says his work has been misused to justify bans on the care. Gordon Guyatt, an epidemiologist and a professor of health research methods, evidence, and impact at McMaster University in Canada, joined in 3 reviews of this care for children and young adults, one of puberty blockers, one of hormone therapy, and one of top surgery. A PhD student led the reviews, and Guyatt's task was to assure they were as objective as possible. Stat 10 reports. Oh, goody, another publication I'm unfamiliar with, because I'm getting this from The Advocate. The reviews found the evidence for these treatments had either low or very low certainty, the site notes, but Guyatt said that's not a reason to ban them. Low quality evidence doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means we don't know, and so we try, he told Stat 10. There is, I would say, quite good evidence from the accounts of the individuals who've undergone the therapy that they were really benefited by the therapy. There's actually low-quality evidence for most medical care, he said, such as the exercises he was advised to do after hurting his neck in a mountain biking accident. The reviews were funded by the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, which doesn't explicitly advocate for restrictive policies, but consistently emphasizes the weaknesses of the evidence base for gender-affirming care, emboldening those who do call for bans, Stat 10 reports. It submitted a friend of the court brief in the U.S. Supreme Court case on Tennessee's law banning this care for transgender youth, and it was in support of neither party, but called gender-affirming care experimental. highlighting its remarkably weak scientific foundation, the outlet explains. The court upheld the law and said other states can enact or enforce similar laws. So basically, a bunch of non-scientists are taking reviews that they do not understand and using it to justify their beliefs because they don't understand what was the term they used? Low quality evidence. They assume that means that it's bad. Whereas this guy right here says all medical care is low quality evidence. And I can only assume that it's that way because the gold standard for science is not anecdotal. You do not use anecdotal evidence to justify scientific studies, scientific conclusions. So, and let's face it, some people benefit from certain therapy, other people don't. That's why you have 10 million pain relievers. Some work for certain pains, some work for other pains, some don't work for anything at all for the person. I mean, I remember when I was still menstruating, I took Tylenol for headaches. I took ibuprofen for my excruciatingly bad cramping. And oh boy, was it excruciating. And I started taking Aleve for the fact that I have osteoarthritis. I'm trying to now just take Tylenol for any pain because I rarely get headaches. I think it's because my glasses are closer to full correction. I think that's a big issue. I've lost some weight. I'm trying not to eat sweets as much as I used to. So I'm not getting headaches as much. I don't have to worry about cramping anymore because thank you, hysterectomy. And, well, my sister-in-law told me that, taking 2 Aleve at a time, for a brief time is fine, but it'll do a number on your kidneys. Yeah, I'd like to keep my kidneys, thank you very much, so I'm trying to wean myself off of Aleve. So it's either Tylenol or use something like Voltaren on the actual joint. That's what I'm left with. Because I don't do well with medication. I just don't. So, but if you were to look at the scientific evidence, well, Tylenol is recommended for headaches. It's recommended for other things. But it just doesn't work for me because if I use something too often, it stops working. I become immune to it. So that's why I use different medications for different ailments because I used to suffer from headaches quite a bit and from cramping. So obviously I have to take 2 different things for that. So, yeah. But that's completely anecdotal. That's just me. That doesn't say anything about the efficacy of any of those drugs. So, I'm assuming that that's why that's low quality evidence. Because people are different. Some things work well for people. Other therapies work better. So, there's that. Okay, and you learned much more about me than anybody ever wanted to know. All right, where am I now? The Southern Poverty Law Center has designated SEGM a hate group. Wait a minute. Where did we go for SEGM? Oh, Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine. Okay. When LGBTQ plus activists questioned the worth of the McMaster reviews because of the funding source, university officials said they would no longer accept money from SEGM. Guyette believes he and other researchers do a good job of keeping the funding source from influencing them, he said, such as in drug trials funded by pharmaceutical companies, which he's often involved in. If anything, that's easier in systemic reviews to keep it clean than in the randomized trials, he noted. He knew that SEGM had supported the reviews, but didn't know it had a formal contract with the university, he said. When he realized the reviews were being used to justify bans, he decided to speak out. It just became extremely evident to me that our work was being used in what I thought was egregious and unconscionable ways, he said. He wrote a letter to the editor about this to a right-wing Canadian newspaper, which didn't publish it, but he's now glad that McMaster had issued his statement. Yeah, why would you think that a right-wing newspaper would publish something anathema to the right-wing cause? I mean, you're basically saying, yeah, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't use the care. You should ban it. Obviously, that's not what the right-wingers want to hear. So, of course, they're going to ban it. They're not going to publish it. Why did you go in that route? This epidemiologist obviously is not very political, because if he was, he would know that it isn't worth his time to even send it to a right-wing paper. He said gender-affirming care should be done with caution and allowed that there's some appeal for using certain interventions, such as hormone therapy, only in research, but if you say in research only, and the potential for being involved in the research can accommodate 1% of the individuals seeking care, then that's not acceptable. The care should be available to all those who pass the hurdles, he said. If we put minimal or zero value on patient autonomy and a very high value on avoiding harm to the what seems clear minority of individuals who, had they gone forward, would be harmed, then banning gender-affirming care would be a reasonable position, he added. Those values and preferences that I've just described are extremely problematic from my point of view. I would say that the values and preferences for those who are banning it, I think, come from a broader anti-trans perspective. You think? Really? Huh. That's an understatement. Anyway, that is the end of that article. So, yes. As usual, the right wing is taking a study that they have no understanding of and are using it to ban gender-affirming care for trans kids. Because, saying it's experimental, or that that it has low quality evidence, you're basically that's basically how did I want to phrase that? You're basically taking words that you do not understand. I mean, you hear low quality evidence, and yeah, as a layman, you would think, okay, that sounds bad. But to say it's experimental? Gender-affirming care has been around forever. Cis people do gender-affirming care. It's not something that just happens for trans people. So, and I've mentioned that. I mean, there's still a debate on whether people who are in menopause should be on hormones. You know, is it going to cause cancer? Some people are saying that myth is overblown. That it could, but it's more likely that it'll help you. So that's gender affirming care. Having my hysterectomy when I was, well, I looked 7 months pregnant because uterine fibroids, which was what was causing my cramps from hell. Well, it was decided that that was the cause. Oh yeah, that and ovarian cysts. So I had all sorts of fun going on down there. I had to have it removed because it's not like I was going to go into menopause anytime soon. Because my doctor made sure that I didn't go into medical menopause. So, but that's still gender affirming care. So, this is not something that is unique to trans people. Obviously, we're aware of it because of puberty blockers and cross sex hormones and surgeries. But for whatever reason, cis people get gender affirming surgeries. You have breast cancer and you need to have a mastectomy, especially a double mastectomy, but a mastectomy. Well, there are some women who don't like that they no longer have their breasts. All right, top surgery it is. If there is a reason to have bottom surgery for cis people, not coming to mind at the moment, but still, the fact is that that's a thing. So, it's not experimental. I mean, it's not like this hasn't been happening for a while. I don't know when they started doing any of these things, but like with puberty blockers, it started off with people with precocious puberty. People who were going through puberty way, way, way too young. Nobody said shit about side effects and what if this happens or that happens. Nobody brought that up. Why? Because the general population didn't know about it. Because that wasn't a culture war issue. But because this is a culture war issue, people are losing their flippin' minds. So, yeah, I wish that this article had explained why all medical care is low quality evidence, but I'm assuming it's because it's mostly anecdotal, is my guess. Anyway, that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.